Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at the beginning of the 2043 offseason. It was a pretty successful year for the Pirates, especially given all the losses we had through trade and free agency last offseason. Went 97 and 65, which is the best record of our playthrough thus far. We made the playoffs for the fourth time in the last 5 seasons, 4 times in 6 seasons overall as GM of the team. Increased our attendance, increased our revenue, and the end result of that, with 4 playoff appearances in 5 years, which is honestly the second best run in the long and storied history of the Pirates franchise. Only in the early to mid 70s did they make the playoffs 5 out of 6 years. Other than that, this is as great as it's ever been in the history of Pittsburgh. And we also helped penny pinching owner Bob Nutting make almost $21 million last year. And despite the success on the field and on the income statement and balance sheet, Nutting has kept our budget the same for next season as it was this past year. So that was pretty depressing, and it means that I feel like the only lever that we can press is the fan interest lever. So I've just got to sign popular players, try to bump fan interest up as high as possible. Sadly, in terms of expanding our budget and getting the fans in Pittsburgh actually interested in this team, winning pretty consistently, and as I said, having the best run in terms of the playoffs, or the second best run in terms of the playoffs in the 140-ish year history of the Pirates, might be longer than that, isn't enough to get the fans interested. So we've just got to kind of play the fan interest game. So that's what we're going to focus on in the early stages of this offseason. Since we have several players whose salaries are going to increase significantly through arbitration, most notably closer Manny Collazo, we're also going to be trading away arbitration-eligible players, as has become our habit this time of year. And of course, the problem with Collazo is not just that he's an excellent player on the field, with 80 saves for us and an ERA of about under 250 over his 2 years with our team. But he's also extremely popular, so when we get rid of him, that's just going to undermine the fan interest that we're trying to keep up. But we just can't afford to be spending $16 million-ish a year on a reliever, even if he's an excellent reliever with this team. I think the fact that he does have the stamina to start probably means he gets starters money in arbitration, perhaps. He did start 11 games in the early stages of his career with the Orioles before they and we realized that as a 2-pitch pitcher with a brutal changeup, he's really much better out of the pen. But maybe given the fact that he has that third pitch and the starter's stamina and excellent hold runners, he's being treated in some ways as a potential starter to get to that $16.2 million figure. I don't know. Doesn't really matter what it is, but we'll see what we can get back for him in trade. And to demonstrate just how sad the situation is here, what we're doing now when we're looking for pitchers is we do need a lefty for our bullpen. So we've just searched for someone who's a lefty, who's extremely popular, who's just average-ish or better in all 3 of the main pitching categories. And you'll see there's really not a ton of players who meet that criteria. And sadly for us, Collazo, who, as I mentioned, we're going to be losing, is one on the list. So even if we're able to find a player here to trade for, which will probably be a pretty costly trade, it's probably still going to be a wash in terms of attendance and fan interest, because on the other end, we're going to be losing Collazo. So it does feel like it's a bit of a win one, lose one one step forward, two steps back kind of situation here, fighting for the popularity in Pittsburgh. But we've got to be real diligent and intentional about it this offseason, and hopefully that'll allow us to raise prices a bit, get a few more fans in the stands, and generate more money for old man nutting, and hopefully we can do it in a way that the team also remains very competitive on the field. And it turns out that the only somewhat realistic target is reliever Danny Robles from the Twins, and he's 23 years old. He really profiles as a very average-ish pitcher. He was up in the majors parts of each of the last two seasons, put up a 3.38 ERA in a very small amount of time, and then a 4.11 ERA this year. But he's durable. He's a lefty. He's a guy who can start and relieve. And he is more effective against lefties than he is against righties. Honestly, he's below average against righties. Really don't want to be using him as a starter, even though we could. Would like to use him as a mediocre left-handed specialist. But he's extremely popular, and because of that, he's an obvious guy for us to add this offseason. Problem is, it's not going to be cheap. We are getting a little bit of cash in return, but we have to give up Luis Flores, who was our international free agent signing back in 2040. He hasn't made it out of rookie ball yet. He's only 20 years old, but he certainly profiles as someone who could be a bit better than Robles eventually. I don't love his personality. He does have the high work ethic, which is probably one of the most important things in terms of ultimately achieving your potential. But some of the other issues, he's not necessarily the greatest influence on those around him in terms of their development. But he's a 20-year-old ground ball pitcher throwing in the mid to high 90s, so it's certainly not a costless endeavor for us. And honestly, like I said, I think if Flores develops as expected, he's a better pitcher than Robles. But we need a popular player. So we're going to go ahead and complete the trade. And we'll see what happens. As I said, with the pending loss of Collazo, this probably even only just keeps us even in terms of fan interest. But we'll see what ultimately happens. Good news is that the fans did like that deal. While I'm going through the messages here, Ishmael Heel, who was our backup catcher this past year, we've got a $1.8 million option on him for next season. His defense has started to slide a bit in his early 30s, and obviously he's not much of a hitter. So we are going to decline that option. It'll leave us with just Ibarra, basically in the majors, or quite honestly kind of in AAA as someone who you'd want at a major league, as a major league catcher. So it means we're going to have to find a backup catcher, but we're going to avoid that last contract here to hopefully open up a little bit more money. We did get a 3-point bump from the trade, so I guess that's better than nothing. Again, we're probably going to lose just as much when Collazo goes. Although we are going to start looking to move some of those players with the big salary arbitration numbers next year. We're going to do our usual adjustments of our scouting and development budgets just to open up a little bit of money. And you can see right now we have to rip those down to the bone just to get a little bit of money for free agents and extensions. But hopefully when we start re-signing some of our arbitration-eligible players, hopefully at a little bit of a lower price than they're asking for, and we also start dealing away some of the real expensive players, that'll open up some more money for us, and we'll be able to hopefully ultimately have a little bit of money for free agents, get our player payroll back in line with what our budget is, and hopefully get scouting and development back up. Quite honestly, given that we are competing for right now, I'm probably not going to be as focused on keeping our scouting and development quite as high. It's been an important thing for us. And we still have a good minor league system at this point, 10th overall. Ooh, the good news is that after that good season, we can cut our draft budget a bit for next year, which will help. Because we're not going to have a big free agent leaving like we did last year with Ricky Gotti. So we won't be getting likely any compensatory picks next year. And one of you has been asking about Rich Moondog Gilbo, who was the number 1 overall pick in the draft back in 2042. He's currently viewed as the number 1 prospect in baseball, and you can kind of see why. His speed is incredible. He's a potentially excellent defensive outfielder, and with that contact and gap power, this looks like a guy who could be a perennial 320, 330 hitter, slamming doubles and triples all around the field. Spent his first year in Milwaukee this year after a very rapid rise up through the minors last season, where he got as high as Double-A. And he hit .299 for Milwaukee in 595 at-bats, so definitely was a full year as a 22-year-old. Did have 38 doubles, 7 triples, 7 homers. Think he can be even better than this when he gets going, but still put up a 5.6 WAR with that good offense and potentially excellent defense. So unfortunate that we didn't have the number 1 pick that year. Obviously would have loved to bring somebody like him on board, but we've still got a pretty good farm system, so we don't want to totally ignore scouting and development, but we've got to change what we're doing. We're real successful on the field, but we're just not expanding the budget. And if we want to build something that's feels more sustainable than what we're doing right now, we're going to have to open up more money. So we're going to have to play the fan interest game as hard as we ever have this offseason. And as I mentioned, with Tony Jones, Omar Vieira, and Ishmael Heel as our pending free agents, certainly not making any qualifying offers, so we won't be getting any extra draft picks. And then Angel Calvan and Nelson Torley, who we picked up near the trade deadline, and Adam Fuchs, who was a catcher in AAA, are also pending free agents without compensation. So really just need to focus on our arbitration-eligible players. As I mentioned, we're going to be moving on from Collazo, likely going to be moving on from reliever Elijah Helton. Really like the guy, and he's been good for us. And probably going to have to move on from second baseman Victor Serrano, who's hurt right now, as well as possibly right fielder Alex Perkins, to open up the money that we're going to need to get our budget back in line. All right, so starting to plan out the arbitration-eligible players, obviously we're going to try to bring back Longoria, and he's also extremely popular, so hopefully getting him signed to a 1-year deal will help. Gaylord and Jarmon are also somewhat popular, so it'll help to get them back into the bullpen. And then also made offers to Alfredo Velasquez, Juan Rivera, and Jaden Dixon. Collazo we're going to have to move on from. We can't be paying a reliever $16 million as much as we like him. Elijah Helton we were going to move on from also, because he's a middle reliever making about $6 million a year, over $6 million. He has been very effective for us, and he's also extremely popular. So we've got to play this stupid popularity game, but given the dearth of extremely popular pitchers that were very good out there, and granted we were only looking at lefties, so you can certainly open it up, but if we look at righties also, but there is an argument to bring Helton back if we can afford it, simply to get the boost by signing another extremely popular player. I hate that this is the way I'm playing the game, but it's what I've got to do. Victor Serrano, who's been our second baseman for the last several years, is out with a torn PCL. Should be back at the start-ish of next season. Going to have to start with a rehab assignment, I'm sure. But he's looking for over $4 million. He's obviously very good defensively. and has been, particularly this past season, a productive offensive player for us. But I think with some of the youth that we have brought on in our infield in recent years, with players like Juan Rivera and Ethan Fox, and the fact that we've still got some decent gloves in AAA, even if they're not great bats, I think we're going to have to move on from Serrano. The hope is that in trading a Serrano, a Collazo, Alex Perkins, who we're also going to move on from, looking to make about $6 million, and despite the excellent rookie season that he had, you look at his batting profile and what he's subsequently done to being Rookie of the Year, and I think he's a contract that we want to move on from. Also not very popular, which makes it easier. But hopefully trading away people like Perkins, Serrano, Collazo, and possibly Helton will allow us to, at some point, bring in maybe another infielder who can be in the mix to play second base, and maybe the catcher that we're going to need to back up Ibarra with the departures of Heel and Fuchs that are pending. Also have decisions on Andres Mendez and Bobby Cintrone. The money on either of them is not all that much, but Mendez is a bench player who's not much of a fielder. Might just be time to move on from him since he's not a great bat. Cintrone, minor league free agent signing of a former Kansas City guy we knew from our time there, was up a little bit this year. He hit respectably in AAA, 293, 15 homers, and 276 at-bats, but he's more versatile defensively and better defensively than Mendez, so that's a reason to potentially keep him around. If he had popularity, I actually would think about signing him, but we're probably going to move on from him. And then the last guy I mentioned is Tony Cota, our excellent defensive shortstop. And his arbitration number is only supposed to be in the $1.8 million range, which is certainly manageable. But he's interested and willing to talk a long-term extension. The issue is that it's $7 million a year up into his mid-30s, with numbers close to $9 million for those out years. As good a glove as he is, as good a personality is, as much as I like the durability, the bat is just so weak that I feel like a $9 million shortstop is a luxury that this Pirates franchise just might not be able to have. That said, we've built this team around pitching and defense, and certainly bringing that glove back at shortstop is going to help our pitchers every day. So I don't know that I want to give him as long of a contract as he's looking for, and I certainly don't want to give him quite as much money as he's looking for. But I think that I'm going to at least have the negotiation with him. 1.8, 3.8, and 5 are his supposed arbitration numbers for the next 3 years. So it's not like he's even really looking to give us much of a bargain. We're above his arbitration numbers in both 29 and his 29 and 30 age years. Save a little bit of money this coming year, and then we're on the hook for him for almost $9 million a year through his mid-30s. So I'm going to make him an offer for probably less years and definitely less money. I don't know if he'll go for it. In a worst-case scenario, we'll try to sign him to a one-year deal and keep bringing him back year to year for the next few years through his arbitration eligibility. All right, we're going to find out how negatively Cota reacts to this. He was looking for 8 years at an average of over $7 million a year. We're offering him 6 years at an average of just $5.3 million a year. We did promise him a role in the starting lineup. I don't think that's going to be a deal maker for us, but that wasn't in his contract. That's the little bone that we threw him. Don't think there's any way he'll go for this, but let's see if we can get the discussion going. Yeah, he's coming down just a little bit, and he still wants 8 years. So we may make one more effort to get him signed now, and then if not, just turn to a 1-year arbitration kind of situation. All right, we're trying to meet him a little bit more halfway. He's 8 years, a little over $7 million. We're coming in with 7 years, so we've added a year to the contract, and we've increased the average annual value to $6.1 million. We're still obviously way off in terms of the average value he's looking for, but we'll make this one final offer to him, probably get denied, and then just try to lock him up with a 1-year deal. And actually, he's coming back a little more reasonably now. 5 years, $6.3 million. So we might be able to get something done here. And as I'm looking at trying to structure a deal close to the 5-year, $6.4 million average he's looking for, I've gotten it to 5 years and $6 million. And quite honestly, we're above his arbitration number each of the next 3 years. And then we're at $8 million and $10 million in his first 2 years of free agency. As good as he is defensively, I feel like it's just going year to year is kind of the right thing for us to do at this point. So we're going to just come back with a 1-year deal ahead of his arbitration, and hopefully he'll be interested in that. And he's willing to think about it. We're kind of so hamstrung as far as the budget that I think it's a little early to be making that type of commitment to Tony Cota. Although he's really good defensively, given that his bat is never going to be all that good, I don't think his arbitration numbers and his potential free agency numbers are just going to explode off the page. So don't really want to make a long-term commitment right now. And I think we've also worked out a trade to move on from Victor Serrano. Like him a lot, but he's going to be coming off of a major injury, and he's going to be making around $4 million next year. Probably not going to be ready till May at the major league level. We're definitely going to be hurting our infield defense by moving on from him, potentially. But I don't hate the guy that we're going to get in return, Tony Rendon, who's actually a little younger. So he's going to be very cost effective the next few years. Not a great bat. He does have some speed. He did hit 258 and 256 at-bats. And he's certainly not as good defensively as Serrano is, but he's pretty versatile. You can see he's already, an established second baseman, can play any position in the outfield, can play first or short if you need to. And quite honestly, he's really kind of naturally mostly a third baseman. So I think we'll look to kind of get him some time at third and put him into the mix at third base along with Fox and Dixon next year. He may end up just being a utility infielder for us, but he's much more cost effective than Serrano. And upgrading third base from Dixon is one of the things that we need to do. I'm not sure that Rendon is a big upgrade. I think he's a little bit of an upgrade. Not sure that he'll even end up playing third for us, but he does give us a potential lever there. And most importantly, he's going to be making the major league minimum next year, so we're going to save about $3.5 million compared to what we would have been paying Serrano. The White Sox also throw in a little bit of cash, which obviously always helps us, is a destitute Pittsburgh franchise. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade, move on from Serrano. Kind of a bummer because we really loved the excellent infield defense that we had for the past several years with him and Cota. Obviously, the plan is to bring Cota back at shortstop. And I feel like we can still piece things together decently at second base. Right now, Rivera, who we traded for last year and who took over as our second baseman when Serrano was hurt, will theoretically be our second baseman. He's durable. Again, he's not as good defensively as Serrano, but I think he's still more than respectable as a defensive second baseman. So we're going to lose a little bit there. And then the addition of Rendon will give us some options as a potential utility infielder / possibly a third baseman for us down the line. And another sad departure for the Pirates. We're going to move on from 2041 Rookie of the Year. Alex Perkins was a minor league free agent signing. Our scouts had found him. He was kind of a major league ready player. Obviously did very well for us in his rookie season. Has kind of regressed a bit since then, although he was better this year than he was last year. But he's going to be making around $6 million this year. And given the youth in the outfield that we have coming up to our team, and given that he honestly profiles as maybe a little bit above average offensive player, I think that's a contract that is getting dangerous for us. If he was popular, I probably would think about keeping him, similar to what we're considering with Elijah Helton. But since he's not, we're going to move on. We can get a little bit of cash from the Tigers, and then we can also get reliever Mike Wright, who's a lefty arm, which we need. He's not a great pitcher. It kind of profiles as an average-ish to maybe a bit average major leaguer. He can start, though, in addition to relieving over the course of his major league career so far. You know, the 5.50 ERA, certainly not impressive, with the Sierra being over a run better. I think there's reason to think that maybe he'll be more effective with a little more experience and a better defense behind him, and also potentially not requiring him to start all the time. Not a great pitcher, but he's a body, he's a lefty, and it gives us something for Mr. Perkins. So Perkins and Serrano are both gone now in terms of trying to clean up our financial situation, but obviously Mr. Collazo is the big one that we need to still figure out. And the calendar's turned to November and starting to get some of the arbitration-eligible players signed. Looks like Gaylord, the fans were excited about. Jarmone, slight increase. Hopefully they're very excited about Longoria, ecstatic about that, which is good. Got Velasquez and Jaden Dixon signed, signing a bunch of minor leaguers also. Rivera is signed. Tony Cota signed the deal. The fans, slight increase for that. Got our pitching coach and hopefully getting a trainer back soon. But taking a look at the front office now, all right, we have boosted fan interest up to a 70, so that's good with some of those re-signings and some of the trades that we made. Now, we're still going to take a big hit when we need to move on from Mr. Collazo, since he's extremely popular. And we're getting to the point where we need to figure out what to do with him and Elijah Helton also. Cintrone and Mendez probably moving on from both of them, even though we do, at this point, have some holes in the outfield to fill. And I don't necessarily feel like we want to have Alex Racho up right at the start of the season. He only got 40 games in AAA before he injured himself with that partially torn labrum. He did hit .338 there, so from that perspective, he certainly seems ready. But he still has got some work to do on his contact, his home run power, his eye. Probably needs a little more seasoning, but certainly having him on the team at some point next year makes the need around outfield a little less dire if we do decide to move on from both Cintrone and Mendez this offseason. And obviously we've already traded away Perkins, so outfield is taking a hit. Basically we're fine with the starters. We've got Hill in left, we've got Herrera in center, and we've got the guy that we hope will be winning Rookie of the Year in a few days in Gonzalez and Wright. So we're kind of set with starters, but we just don't really have any depth at this point at the major league level. And I think we've pieced together another trade. This one's a little painful, but I think we need to do it. we're trading away two of the better young relief prospects in our system who both made their major league debuts this past year. Luis Espana, just don't love his low movement and his low control, even though his stuff is nasty, and he was very effective in the small sample size at the end of this year. You can see he had ERAs under 2 at every level, AA, AAA in the majors this year. And also Jim Quander, who is kind of the opposite position. Good movement, decent control. Just don't think he's ever going to have the stuff to be an incredibly effective major league pitcher. And he got hit relatively hard with a 5.11 ERA, 19 hits allowed, 13 walks, and 12 and a third innings when we brought him up briefly to the majors. But we can get a little cash back from Seattle, and more importantly, given that we've got a big hole at backup catcher, we can bring in Mario Quiroz, who's been up this past year, the full year. Not much of a hitter, and don't think he ever will be, but he's respectable defensively, good personality, and hopefully can at least, get his batting average into the 200s. But a decent backup catcher who still has 2 option years, making the major league minimum, kind of gives us a nice insurance policy behind Ibarra, and also clears a couple of excess pitchers who are making the major league minimum but still going to be on the 40-man roster and still impact our salary situation. Clears those 2 out with the additions of Robles and Wright through trade over the past few days, kind of starting to fill out the pitching staff at the major league level. And then we've obviously got young guys like Juan Bin Daoud and Sal Valadez who are not far away from being major league pitchers, hopefully, as well. So I just don't see big-time roles for Espana and Quander on the team either this year or especially long into the future, whereas Quiroz probably can be our backup catcher for the next few years. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade and continue trying to reshape this roster. And I think we finally put together the trade that will result in Manny Collazo leaving our team. It really stinks because he's an excellent pitcher. He's durable, got good stuff, good movement, good control. Been incredibly effective ever since we picked him up in that trade with Baltimore. Left-handed arm, which we need. But his arbitration number is going to be close to $16 million next year, and we just can't afford it. Now, he is a fan favorite, and he is extremely popular, so trading him away is going to undo some of the progress we've made in generating fan interest over the last week or so of the game time, so that's not optimal. And we also need to send starting pitching prospect Alexis Prieto, 10th round pick from a couple years ago. Good personality. I don't think he's ever going to really have the control to be an effective major league pitcher. And I think even if he is, he's going to be more of a bullpen arm than a rotation guy. So fine throwing him in. We get a little cash in return. We get a catcher, Sam Nicole, who looks like he can be solid defensively. He's only made it to high A ball. He was a 4th round pick in 2042. Doesn't look like he's ever going to have much of a bat, but with his glove certainly could potentially be a backup catcher at the major league level if things work out for him. And then we're going to get the relief pitcher. Ethan Mingo is a guy who can start or relieve, still making the major league minimum in his 1 option year left. And he's also very popular, so hopefully bringing him on board will offset a little bit of the pain and popularity we're going to feel by moving on from Collazo. Surprised that there wasn't a more robust market for him given how good a pitcher he is, but I think it's the fact that he's going to be making $15.5, $16 million next year that really kind of diminishes his value on the trade market. So we are going to go ahead and make this trade. I'd say hopefully we don't end up facing the Rangers in the World Series by giving them Collazo. They were, I believe, the best record in baseball last year, although they only made it to the ALCS. But honestly, if we do end up facing the Rangers in the World Series and have to face Collazo, It's a good problem to have because it means we made it to the World Series. So maybe we'll see you next October, Manny. Yeah, fans very disappointed that Collazo's gone. Mingo hopefully offsets that a bit. We were 70 fan interest, knocked it down to 67, so probably took a 4-point hit from him and a 1-point benefit from bringing Mingo back, but still have made a little bit of fan interest progress this offseason at this point, and obviously taking the biggest hit that we're going to take moving on from Collazo. Now the question is what we want to do with Elijah Helton, because he's also extremely popular, pretty good reliever. He's looking for a lot of money, though. And with the fact that we've now brought on, with Mingo, 3 new pitchers onto our team this offseason. In Wright, Mingo, and Robles. I don't know that we can be affording to spend $6.5-ish million on Elijah Helton, even though he is a really good middle reliever. Just don't even know if we really have a spot for him on the team. And given that we'd still like to add some help in the outfield, and we'd still like to maybe add a middle infielder, it's definitely into the range of tough decision time for us on him. And the good news is that we can start bumping our scouting and development back up towards respectable levels with the money that we've opened up. I really want to make sure that we get that development up. And there goes all the money that we were hoping to spend this off season. I mean, I think when you look at it realistically, even if we're down a little bit in scouting and development from last year, it gives us about $4 million. And at this point, that does factor in the money that's set aside for Helton. So we can afford to bring him back. I mean, it certainly means we're not going to do anything else to the pitching staff this offseason. And it gives us a little bit of money to potentially spend on finding a backup outfielder or two, or picking up someone in a trade. And we do kind of have a surplus of pitching now if we bring him back, so we can potentially trade away somebody to get that help that we need in the outfield. I'm inclined to bring him back because when I looked at the pending free agents, and again, I did that pathetic search where I'm just looking for pitchers and who's popular. Most of the guys were pretty expensive. Andy Ochoa, who is extremely popular, is a guy who was with us until a couple years ago. He is extremely popular, and we can potentially get him for maybe around a little over $2 million. So he's a lot more cost-effective than Helton would be, but he's not as good a pitcher as Helton. And we've got to still factor that in. So I think I'd rather spend the extra couple $1 million, more than a couple, extra $4 million to potentially try to bring back Elijah Helton for one more year. Since boosting our fan interest is a big part of what we're doing. And hopefully that'll allow us to get the ticket prices up a notch for next year also and generate some more revenue. So we're going to submit a $6.2 million offer for 1 year to Helton. Definitely expensive for a middle reliever, especially for the Pirates, but as I've talked about, we're not just playing to put a quality winning team on the field battle right now. We're really focused on the fan interest battle, and with him being a good pitcher who's extremely popular, that's proven to be effective on our team, I think it makes sense to bring him back. As I said, with the additions of him, or not really the addition of him, but with bringing back him and then adding Mingo, Robles, and Wright already this offseason, and then having guys like Bin Daoud and Valadez and even Cortez Ronquillo in AAA and close to the major league level, our pitching is really set. We don't have a lot of money left as we head into the offseason and free agency. Obviously, we're not going to be making huge moves, but we really don't even need to think about pitching when we get into free agency and trading. We probably have a little bit of a surplus that we can trade. So the goal is going to be to hopefully add another bat for the outfield, maybe another decent infielder when the offseason really begins in earnest with free agency in a couple of weeks. And we've decided now we're not going to make offers to Bobby Cintrone or Andres Mendez, so that'll officially open up the holes that we've been thinking about in the outfield, but it should ultimately help free up a little more money for us for free agents. So net, I think it's the right thing to do. And we have gotten Elijah Helton signed, so that kind of ends our salary arbitration battles since we're going to move on from Cintrone and Mendez. Only got a 1-point bump, even though he's an extremely popular player, but it is what it is. It's better than nothing. Would have preferred that it be more, but it is what it is, as I said. We did kind of waive and DFA a few other players to open up a little more free agency, a little more money for free agency. I think right now I'm tentatively going to try to increase the ticket price up to 16. We're certainly going to take, and we've got time to figure that out before the winter meetings, but I don't want to forget about it. Right now, we've picked up close to 10 points in fan interest from the end of the season, which is positive, but when Tony Jones, who's very popular, signs with somebody, we're going to take another hit. And I don't know how popular Torley and Calvin are. They weren't with us long. Torley's popular. He hit 205 in 16 games with us. Wouldn't think that we should get much of a hit there. And Calvin's extremely popular. So, yeah, we're going to be taking some more hits to fan interest when some of these free agents ultimately sign with other teams. But hopefully we'll be a little stronger than we were a year ago when all is said and done. Still have the opportunity on our side to add, as I said, a couple of players, probably in the outfield or the infield. So we're going to focus on trying to bring on someone who's good and can help us win, but also someone who's popular to sell a few more tickets. Looks like the gold gloves came out today, and we didn't get a special email for us. So another year with no gold glovers, despite the fact that we had one of the better defenses in the league last year. A little bit surprising, I'd say, given that we've had really a big focus on defense, and I think in most cases, particularly the critical spots like catcher, shortstop, second base, and center field, we've been pretty solid. But you can see no all-stars here. Shortstop, Ricky Araiza. Yeah, I mean, he's really good. As good as Coda is, I think Araiza's ratings are better, so it makes sense that he's winning the gold gloves. But at some point we'll get another. But moving on to the reliever of the year, where our old buddy Collazo is probably in the mix, even though he's no longer even on our team at this point. Collazo was second, got 4 first-place votes. He was third in terms of the first-place votes behind Perez and Morales of the Braves and the Cardinals, who met in the NLCS, but just kind of edged out, so he must have gotten a bunch of second-place votes. Harry Morales, kind of an interesting season to win the reliever of the year. 7-2 record, 9 saves, 2.22 ERA over 69 innings. Collazo with a 2.30 ERA, 95 Ks over 70 and a third innings, 5-5 record with 37 saves. And then you look at what Perez did with 124 strikeouts over 71 and 2/3 innings and 51 saves. A little surprising to me that neither Collazo nor Perez gets the award, but went to Harry Morales, who really impressed people with how he performed. And we had waived and DFA'd Nelson Torley, who you'll remember I was just talking about the fact that he hit 205 for us in 16 games. But the fans are not happy that he's gone, and we took a 2-point hit to fan interest. It's just kind of ridiculous the way this dynamic works, particularly when you're dealing with a crappy team. You know, the fans really wanted the utility infielder that batted 200 that was on the team for 2 months, who's in his 30s. You know, the fact that we're moving on from him, they're really upset about. And we've got to release Omar Vieira now. I'm guessing that'll probably be a fan interest hit too. Well, surprisingly, it's not. And in a bit of a shock, no silver sluggers for the Pirates this year. So Isaiah Hill's streak of being an all-star and a silver slugger winner every year of his career is finally over. Looks like in left field he got edged out by Tony Lisenby of the Nationals, who certainly had a big-time year, winning a batting title, leading the NL in hits with 46 homers and 132 runs driven in. You know, can't really argue with that. Lisenby obviously had a great year, but probably doesn't speak well for Hill's chances to get a third MVP award this year. And I didn't think he was going to, but thought he would at least be in the mix. 319 batting average was the highest he's ever had. 47 homers, 140 ribbies, put up a 7.7 WAR. You know, I guess winning the batting title and leading the league in hits was the differentiator there. But Isaiah Hill no longer has a perfect record of always winning a Silver Slugger award for us. But we will be moving a Rookie of the Year tomorrow, and I would have to think that Henry Gonzalez is a very strong contender for that, even though he was down in the minors for the first month of the season. I think he did end up winning 3 Rookie of the Month's awards when all was said and done. So I would think that that would be what this email is. Yep, Henry Gonzalez, not a unanimous winner. Rich Gilbo, who we were talking about earlier in this episode, another former number 1 overall draft pick back in 2043, finished second behind our guy Henry Gonzalez, the number 1 overall pick in 2038. 271 average, 22 doubles, 24 homers, scored 100 runs, drove in 67, and certainly looks like he can get even better. So with him and Isaiah Hill kind of as the cornerstones of our offense for the next few years, hopefully the Pirates can continue to score a lot of runs, which we did last year and hadn't necessarily been doing consistently in previous seasons. And another big award, our guy Tony Santana, the 20-game winner, although Rod Perales, who finished second, was also a 20-game winner. But Luis Longoria, our other kind of co-ace, did get 1 vote along the way, but Tony Santana with 26 first-place votes for Cy Young Award. He's been a cornerstone of this team since we started, one of the guys that we extended to a long-term contract. And it all finally came together for him this year. 20-2 record, 2.78 ERA, 229 strikeouts over 187 and 2/3 innings, 1.52 ERA plus, 75 FIP minus, a 5 WAR, and a 2.65 SIERA. You can see he had, despite the success that we had since we took over in 2038, he was generally kind of a 500 pitcher for us the first 5 years in terms of his 1-loss record. Never actually had a losing record, but also was never more than 2 games over 500. And this year the luck worked in his favor, and he pitched long enough, even though he only averaged a little less than 6 innings a start, to get a lot of decisions, probably helped by our big offense staking him out to leads and him not giving up very many runs. But good to see Mr. Santana adding a Cy Young Award to his 2 All-Star appearances. And looking at the other big awards in the American League, Houston's Rogelio Loera, Cy Young Award, 16-8 record, 3.06 ERA. I don't think that's his first. Yeah, it's his sixth Cy Young Award for the brilliant pitcher from Houston. Eddie Farley of Detroit, the AL MVP, 54 homers, 137 ribbies, 288 batting average. Our former farmhand, Angel Aguilar, second in the voting, so his career is off to an explosive start offensively. And in the National League, Isaiah Hill ended up finishing third, but Jose Sanchez of the Rockies was a unanimous winner, center fielder. Yeah, that's a nice season. 139 runs scored, 65 homers, 144 ribbies, 678 slugging percentage, 1.08 OPS plus, or OPS, 179 WRC plus, and a 9.8 WAR. Led the league in all of those categories, while also likely playing a pretty solid center field. So not a shock to see him there. Isaiah Hill did finish third, just slightly behind Lisenby, the guy who edged him out for a Silver Slugger this year. So another nice year for Isaiah Hill. And nice to actually see our pitcher, Tony Santana, get a few MVP votes also. And we've made it to arbitration hearing day. Again, nothing going to happen with us. We're going to be moving on from both Cintrone and Mendez. So we're going to sim through that, head to free agency, see who's out there, and finish up this episode. So we've made it to the start of free agency. Take a quick look at the international amateur free agents. Alfredo Harrow, a starter. Not a bad player, but as I've talked about, we've got plenty of starters and plenty of pitchers at this point. The only way we might chase him is if he was popular for some reason. Oliver Arroyo, first baseman. Not really all that exciting, looking for $9 million. Yu Xing Pian out of Taiwan, first baseman, looking for pretty big money. Not that exciting. Luis Jimenez, a third baseman. Not the greatest prospect in the world, but at least he's cheap. He says he's looking for $1.3 million. We'll offer him a minor league contract. I'm sure he won't go for that, but at least we'll start a discussion with him. Maybe he's a guy who can help our system. Shortstop Luis Dimas, not a great personality, looking for a decent amount of money. Nothing all that exciting, quite honestly. Raul Cardenas, And then the big-time free agents, Luis Linares, former player for us on the market as a free agent. Certainly could help at shortstop or third base, but looking for about $24 million a year, so he will not be rejoining us. Willis Cabello, starting pitcher from the Mets, going to be looking for a ton of money, I'm sure, close to $25 million. Keiichi Ueno, pretty good center fielder. I'm sure the money is he's wrecked physically. Yerald Nin, Luis Castro, Chris Saucedo, outfielder. Again, we need outfield help, but we need more just a good backup who's got a good personality, good defensively, and most importantly, although being a backup is popular with the fans, is really what we're going to be looking for. Starting pitcher Victor Alfaro, certainly another good pitcher, but looking for close to $33 million a year, not in the mix for us. I'm sure Juan Valderrama's too expensive. Jesus Santana, I'm sure, is too expensive. And Tristan Champion of the Mets, coming off of that injury that kept him out of the playoffs. Going to be looking for big money also. So not going to be finding much for these Pirates at the top end of the market. And fan interest continues to shrink a little bit with some of the other moves that we made, though. We have opened up some money. We can take on some contracts now. It's going to have to be one-year contracts since we don't have any money available for extensions. But we can take on some contracts. We can sign some guys to one-year deals. And we can also potentially put a little more in scouting and development as we get closer to the start of the season. So Still got a lot of work to do. As I've talked about, I feel it's on the batting and fielding side of the game rather than pitching. It's inconceivable to me that we're going to do anything real significant in pitching. If there is a brilliant player who's extremely popular who wants to sign for a couple $1,000,000, then we would go in that direction, but not expecting that to be the case. So it's going to be a lot of focus on some popular players to be backups for us, a popular backup infielder perhaps, and a couple of popular backup outfielders is kind of what we're going to be looking for in free agency or trade as the hot stove season really heats up. And we'll focus on that in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.